what is the Torah's response? So people will say, what do you mean, what's the Torah's response? It wasn't around when Torah was given. No, that's a mistake. Torah was given as an eternity. Torah was given to potentially encapsulate every possible scenario. And therefore, the halachic experts get to work. They find the source in Torah which was relevant to this particular question. That's a talk in itself how that works. But it's a podcast in itself how that works. We should do it maybe one day. And they come up with the format and they come up with the response. You are listening to the JP Show,
where we discuss the issues you care about from a Jewish perspective.
I am Rabbi G.
And I am Rabbi Levi.
And we hope you enjoy this episode. We are back. Welcome everyone to another episode of the JP Show. I'm here with Rabbi Levi. Wherever you're watching, please leave a review or subscribe and enjoy. So, what's happening?
A lot is happening. It's a busy time of year. This is, it's always busy at BINA actually. There's always like multiple things happening every day.
So many different directions, so many different things.
Yeah. Like Ba'omer is coming up, Shavuot is coming up.
Yeah.
Very exciting things. And on that note, so I want to discuss something which I think can cover a whole range of topics, but it's just interesting. A little bit connected to what we discussed last week about time, but a different thing about time altogether. And actually more connected to Shavuot, which is coming up, which we're counting towards. And that is sort of just to introduce the topic. So the Torah was given, I don't know, something like 300 something years ago.
Over 3,300 years ago.
Yeah. With rules and principles and foundations of how we live our life. And of course, many things have changed since then in the world. The world's a very different world than from 3,300 something years ago. In fact, I think it's a different world than what it was, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago or whatever. The world changes very, very fast nowadays. Definitely different when you grew up, probably different than when I was a kid also, in many ways. Yet, we speak about this a lot, that one of the foundations of Judaism is that the Torah is eternal and nothing changes in that sense. The same Shabbat that was given to us more than 3,000 years ago, we keep the same day and same festivals, the same mitzvot and all of that. So what I want to discuss is the change of generations and how things have changed. And obviously we don't know exactly what the world was like 3,000 years ago. We could talk about the way the world was a few years ago when you were growing up, and how things changed to now. How on the one hand, there's the eternity of principles and values. On the other hand, things sometimes do change the way we apply them, how we apply it to the current situation. And I guess part of the discussion is like, sometimes we refuse to change anything. We're sort of very stubborn and say, no, this is exactly the way it's going to be. It doesn't make a difference what's happening in the world. And sometimes we will change the form of it, but in principle, it's the same principles. I think we can...
Can you give me an example?
So I'm going to give you an example. I can give you hundreds of examples, actually. And I want to go through a few examples and see just interested in what you say. Like, should we change it altogether? Should it not be changed at all?
Well, give me one example so I understand the question.
Well, I guess, like, for example, example of something that hasn't changed at all is kashrut, for example, right? The same commandment that was given at the giving of at Sinai. We're still not eating the same animals. We're still slaughtering the animals in the same way. We're still getting the meat ready in the same way.
Still not
obviously the stringencies and different things, but the sort of the general thing is the same, right? But then there's things which are more gray, I guess, which are not about you can or you can't do this. I'll give you an example which we've probably discussed in the past, but interesting to see what you say. So, education. How we educate our children. So I think a Torah principle is that we educate our children with discipline and obedience and there's even expression, I think it comes from the Talmud, that if you withhold the rod, you hate your son.
It's actually a verse.
That's a verse, that's right, yeah.
In Proverbs.
Yeah. So if you withhold the rod, you hate your children. In other words, you have to sometimes discipline. Whether that means physically or not could be another discussion. But children are different now. I don't know. Maybe they're not. I don't know. But people seem to educate differently nowadays. Should we be doing exactly the same thing that our grandfathers and grandmothers were doing, or has it changed? That's just one example. We can get into other examples soon.
Wow. Okay, phew, there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
A lot to unpack in that one question. First of all, as you were asking the question, I was thinking to myself, before we get to your good question about the nuances about when yes and when not, one of the most beautiful things about Judaism and the belief that we have in the authenticity of Torah and the divine revelation at Sinai and so on is that it doesn't change. So I was just thinking, a couple of days ago, I can make this a bit lighter if you don't mind, this part. I sent a WhatsApp message or something on a group. I don't know exactly what it was. And within 2 minutes, she came upstairs to my office to tell me that I'm writing it like an 80-year-old and that no one writes it like that anymore. And that's not the way people communicate.
Yeah.
Which is true. Okay, so I'm not 80, but I'm over 60. And you're under 40.
I'm under 35. I'm not under 40.
Okay, sorry, you're under 35.
When you say under 40, it means like you're 39. I'm only 34.
You're under 35.
I'm almost 35. It's true. Actually, it's coming up. But
you're under 35, so you still kind of qualify for a young adult.
That's right.
And yes, it's different. It's different. And you make fun of my style, and correct.
Yeah.
And I like making phone calls. You like sending messages. I like all that kind of thing. And yet, I know that you'll be as strict or as particular about a Shabbat thing or a kashrut thing in exactly the same way I would do it, exactly the same way my father did it or my grandfather did it.
Yeah.
And nothing's changed, right? Which is the beauty. In other words, of course things change, cultures change, styles change. Inconsequential things change, right? How people do things and what grabs people, what's going to take people and so on and so forth. But there's a constant moral compass, a constant formula, a constant way of living, which is a proven path of how the chain is transmitted from generation to generation. And throughout the generations, those who try to alter it and change it, ultimately it never succeeded, right? To be blunt, Moses Mendelssohn, for example, who's perhaps credited with the father of the Enlightenment or father of the Reform, whatever, made many changes. Apparently there's not one Jewish descendant of Moses Mendelssohn today, which is fascinating. And so on, many. There was a group called the Karaites, who only believed in the written Torah, not the oral Torah. This goes back almost 1,000 years, I think. There's like about 15 of them today. I don't know exactly what, but there's a small community of them. Today's nothing. Whereas Jewish communities are thriving, and many people are returning to their roots, and Jewish learning is on fire all over the world. America, Israel, Australia too a little bit, probably needs to do more, but yeah, so that's the beauty, that's the greatness of the eternity, because the eternal part of Torah is that it doesn't come from a changing world, it comes from something which transcends the world, right? Okay, so that's just a general comment, but to your example, let's discuss your example, right? So let's just break it down to a few parts. So first of all, why is Torah eternal? Because, and even though the world is changing, why the same kashrut? Why is the same matzah and pesach? Why do we still not eat chametz? Why are we so strict about Shabbat and so on, right? So again, the concept is that the Torah is not a handbook that responds to civilization. Because if it was, then it would be like any other constitution or any other set of laws, which responds to civilization. And because civilization changes, therefore the laws change, the handbook changes.
Yeah.
On the contrary, the Zohar tells us that the Torah is the blueprint of creation. In other words, it's the plan, it's the architectural plan of the whole universe. And therefore, when God gave the Torah, He gave us the gift of His Torah, it was giving us the secret, giving us the plan of how the world exists. In other words, the civilization or the world is an outcome of Torah, not Torah is not a response to civilization, right? Which means that it applies in all generations. It can respond to every generation, every civilization, every culture, every time, every fashion, every style. So before we get to the things that maybe we do change, a very important part of it is not only are we keeping the same Torah, but Torah recognizes that things changes and responds to that change, right? So we have technology that happens today, whether it's engineering technology or it's reproductive technology or it's organ donation, whatever, all the new questions that come up that never ever existed before. There's a method of how we find, the first question a Jew asks is, what is the Torah's response? So people say, what do you mean, what's the Torah's response? It wasn't around when Torah was given. No, that's a mistake. Torah was given as an eternity. Torah was given to potentially encapsulate every possible scenario. And therefore, the halachic experts get to work. They find the source in Torah which was relevant to this particular question. That's a talk in itself how that works, but it's a podcast in itself how that works. We should do it maybe one day. And they come up with the format and they come up with a response. Torah itself allows for responses to have different views, and sometimes it also happens and then it tells us exactly what to do with those different views, how should we follow them, and so on. There's a formula, and it's a tested formula, and it's been going for 3,300 years, and it's still working the same way, with certain variations. The truths of the Torah are always there. Now, your example is a good example, because the formula of how this works is that we have, together with the technical laws, we also have tradition, and the ones who guide the traditions are the great sages of every generation, who guide us not what we need to still keep or not keep, but more about how we apply certain things. So I'll give you an example. Things do change, but essentially at its very base level, the Torah doesn't change. Let's take your example. King Solomon says, which is part of the Tanakh, part of the Torah, he who spares the rod spoils the child. That is actually...
It's actually more extreme than that. He says, you hate your son.
Yeah. Sorry, Solomon, correct. Yeah, if you hate your son. And actually, I wish people would understand that it's an eternal truth. The only difference is that we have written Torah and oral Torah, and the oral Torah interprets what the verses mean. And we learn and we understand from the great experts, the great pious people, that rod is not necessarily the way we read it. It's not a physical rod.
Yeah.
It means firmness and it means discipline. And the truth is, I wish people would understand that it's an absolutely eternal principle.
Yeah.
Now, we know that the great Gedolim, as we call them, the Tzadikim, Bava Rebbe speaks about this as well, that today if you hit your child, you'll mess it up. But that doesn't mean that the rod doesn't apply.
Yeah.
Kids need structure. Kids need discipline. Positive discipline has to be done in a positive way. There's no one Torah that says it has to be done negatively, or it has to be done by humiliating the child. Nowhere does it say that, right? It gives the principle using certain language, but then you sometimes, depending on the area, you apply that language to the context of which you're working in. So yes, the rod is an eternal principle. What the rod means might vary from culture to culture, from generation to generation. One of the great tragedies of our generation is that people look at the previous generations and decide they were too harsh, which maybe some of them were, and then go to the other extreme, and now we have all this gentle parenting stuff, and which now, by the way, is already in the secular world even
being repudiated,
getting pushback, because when you make up stuff yourself, it fluctuates, and you go to one extreme to the other extreme, another work, a disaster, and all that kind of stuff. So that's a good example. It's a good question. So therefore, that's a particular thing where we say, yes, it's an eternal principle, but it needs to be applied to the context in which you're talking about it.
Yeah. How about, still sort of in the realm of education, I guess, technology. So it used to be, if you want to learn, you take a book and you spend hours. I mean, when I was in yeshiva, I'm sure it's still this way today. You take a book and you spend 3-4 hours poring over a page of Talmud, analyzing it, thinking about it. But now in schools, we have AI, and even not AI necessarily, but like, I guess the method of learning is changing. Should we go along with that? Or I think it's harmful. I think the skill of just sitting with a book and trucking for 3 hours is going to be gone soon. I don't know if kids are able to do that anymore.
So I think it's very important to understand how technology works and what the role of technology is. So here's the thing, right? So when the world changes or technology comes along, the first principle is that nothing happens without God.
Yeah.
And therefore it's got a purpose. There's no question it has a purpose. The Bava Rebbe was very, very strong about this. even though we're talking now, this is past this era, but in the days where people's entertainment in their homes didn't come from a smartphone or from anything else, but came from a television, he was very discouraging of people having a television.
Yeah.
Not because television in essence was wrong, because if it was created by God and therefore it has a purpose, but because for the most part, the content on television is
It's not helpful for spiritual
at
growth.
best a waste of time, at worst very, very harmful spiritually speaking.
Yeah.
So he discouraged people from having television, and yet he let his talks be broadcasted on cable television.
Yeah.
Because it's a vehicle to spread the message, right? So to reject it completely and to say it's got no role is almost as if to say it's not from God, and that's wrong.
Yeah.
It has a role. I mean, on one hand, on one level, the dissemination of Torah study today and the reach that we're able to have to people in far-flung corners of the earth, or people who don't know any better, or don't have a teacher, or don't have access to Hebrew, whatever the case is, and the opportunities they have to be able to study Torah today is unbelievable because of technology. But at the same time, you have to balance that with our tradition. And tradition is also eternal and has certain amazing things. I'll tell you an interesting story. Just recently, an educator shared with me, amongst all details, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to, but an educator shared with me that he went to explore the best possible technology policy in a school, and he went to one of the top private schools in Sydney, a very famous, a very reputable school, and he eventually got an appointment. He sat down with the head of technology, or the principal, and asked him and they said that right now they've actually redone the whole policy of technology, and there's no computers on the desks of the students anymore. Of course, people do research on that, and they used internet, all that kind of stuff.
That's amazing.
But actually, they've gone back to pen and paper, to book reading, with the allowance to use technology as a cherry on the top and to enhance, because they felt that when they went full-flung the other extreme, where every school has to have a computer, every student has a computer, and everything's done on a computer. We all know there's research about screen time, there's research about, it's a different form of learning, and it actually has damaged the ability of the students to properly analyze and think. So, yes.
Let's go back to the books.
Do I recommend that in yeshivot, where people are doing full-time study, they should replace the books with computers? Absolutely not. There's something about the ancient book, the format. Generally in Judaism, and this is, I think, part of the eternity of Torah, where some things do change, but it's always something that's halachically clear, that's forbidden or not forbidden, that doesn't change at all. Something that's just a tradition also doesn't change, because it always has depth, but sometimes it changes, but with tremendous caution. I mean, today in yeshivas, which produce tremendous Torah scholars, right, on very high levels of thinking, still use the ancient Gemara page, the ancient Talmud page, which has no punctuation, no vowels, and it's actually small writing and sometimes hard to read from. Okay. But that's the way our grandparents learned, and they still do that. And it doesn't lessen, I can tell you one thing, it does not lessen the level of education.
Yeah.
There's no question about that.
I mean, I think there might be exceptions to that. It could be there are certain children or even some young adults that can't sit over a book for 3 hours, and maybe for them,
100%.
using a different method of learning is a good thing.
First of all, there's some people that come to learning a little bit later in life, and they don't have the background. Because some of these things you have to acquire when you're young, and some of them don't. Sometimes in schools, there's a mixture of children, a mixture of ability. So the teacher can be teaching something very deep, and the one child doesn't read that well, or can't handle the loud vowels, and he gets held back because he's still busy trying to navigate the book.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, there is a great room to use things, new innovations to enhance. And I've in-service teachers like that. Of course, you need to do that, but you got to start with a baseline of what your aspiration is, and then make accommodations where necessary.
I have another example, but I want to hear from you. What do you think is an example of something which is sort of a modern innovation which we should totally repudiate and throw out? In other words, there's absolutely no benefit.
So much.
There's absolutely no benefit to it at all, even trying to apply it and trying to...
So I said that, by the way, because those who know me that I'm a very big traditionalist.
Yeah.
And changing things in Judaism just for the sake of changing things and to make things look modern, I'm quite allergic to, actually.
Yeah.
On the other hand, those who know me also, I'm very open-minded use modern technology or modern research, modern techniques to incorporate in Judaism when it's helpful and when it's allowed, right? You asked me about so many things. A modern day
theory, invention, thing that actually has no application in Jewish life.
I'm blank because there's so many, so I'm blank now. Do you know one that I'm very passionate about?
I'm trying to think. This idea of accepting yourself the way you are.
Yeah, all that. Oh, so yeah, okay. So yeah. So I was thinking of that as you were saying. Yes, okay. So
That's definitely not.
I'll tell you two. I'll tell you two things, and they're both. One's in education, one's in personal growth. See, exactly. I think personal growth is like those who know me that I'm fairly well read in different psychological modalities, psychological literature, and so on and so forth. But they are those that are in line. I like them, and I teach them, and I share them with other people because they're great models, but they're in line with Jewish thinking, like Viktor Frankl and Edith Eger, who, by the way, I just found out passed away a few months ago.
Oh, really? Wow.
At the age of 99, as far as I can tell.
Wow.
She was a great writer and taught a lot of good things. Taught people responsibility to.
Until recently, she was still working. I mean,
yeah, it was an amazing person, and not to be a victim and all that kind of stuff. There's just a very, very big trend today, which is completely out of line with Jewish thinking, and frankly, doesn't work. It's breeding narcissism and self-centeredness, and that's about always accepting yourself and never judging yourself, and breeds victimhood, and you're always enough and all that kind of stuff. That's one thing which is completely, I think. Yeah, I mean, there's not being harsh on yourself. That's two different things, right?
There's a lot of nuance there, obviously. Yeah.
Always not a lot of nuance. I'll tell you another thing, like the stuff also about education, right? There's even Jewish institutions have somewhat modified, depending on the time we're in and so on. But there's a basic sort of model of education which has been changed. Like, for example, in many schools now they're changing back because they're realizing it doesn't work. But it's just incredible how it always works, right? Like this thing about even when kids are very, very young, so like they can be in grade 1, for example, first grade, and there's a model of not being a frontal teacher and asking them what they think and giving them choice of what they want to learn about, and it's all rubbish, right? Navigation never worked like that, and people don't learn. Now, there is this thing where the Talmud tells us that one should learn where
what
they
enjoy,
what they enjoy, but it's after you've learned for many years. First of all, we know that the stages of development of a child, even Piaget said that, which is quite in line with what it says in the Ethics of the Fathers, but the model was when you're young, you're a sponge. What you do with first graders is you get in front of the classroom and you stuff them with as much information as you can. Later on, when they have a database of information, then they can start analyzing, you can start asking what they think and analyzing. That's what the Pirkei Avot tells us, the Ethics of the Fathers tell us, that when you're young, you just have to learn facts.
Yeah.
And then, when you have enough facts, you start analyzing. If you start analyzing things you know nothing about, then it's worthless. Yeah. Even modern education is now slowly coming back to that already. So that's the kind of another thing that sort of
right.
I would get rid of.
Do you think, let's just go to one more example here. Do you think modern day, I mean, this is obviously a broad description, I don't even know if there is one, but modern day marriages is there anything, put it this way, are there any fundamental Torah principles when it comes to marriage that you think either need to be applied better today or need to be not changed, but channeled in a different way because of today's generation?
Look, relationships do operate with a certain culture. And of course, for example, so I'll tell you one thing that maybe is different today. And again, it's different because it doesn't, and it can be different because it doesn't oppose necessarily any Torah law, right? But for example, the idea that the man is the sole provider and the woman is the sole home carer is really just not around today like that,
yeah.
Right? Women do work and they earn money and self-sufficient and so on. But the idea that there's roles and that each role has something that the other one doesn't have, that definitely continues. And I think people pretend that it's not that way and it's not true. So, obviously it's not quite the way it was in ancient times, but there's still, I mean, the idea of the warmth of a mother and the mother nurturing her children and, the there was, I think it's changing now again, but there was a culture where people would look down at stay-at-home mothers who take care of their children. Why aren't you in the workforce and building up a career? No, because that's unfortunate, because there is something about a mother taking care of her children. There are roles, but I think on the other hand, what's gone and what is Torah principles that is not being applied today, and it's a disaster, is the idea of basic respect, of going beyond yourself, of not being selfish. I mean, so many relationships fall apart today because it's built on what I need and what I want, and egocentricity and not selflessness, rather a lot of selfishness rather than selflessness.
Do you think that romance is a Torah concept, or is that just a modern day invention that has no place? And I don't think your great. I mean, maybe they were. I didn't know them. I don't know. Your great grandparents were overly romantic. I don't think that was a thing then. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was.
So I'm not sure if that's correct. I think there was romance, but it was well into the marriage.
Right.
Romance was not the beginning of a relationship, because that actually doesn't work.
Yeah.
Love is something that has to be nurtured. Love is something that has to be built, get stronger from day to day. It's got to be on the foundation of respect and selflessness. Yes, compatibility, chemistry, all those things are very, very important. So many relationships today begin with this whirlwind romance, intense romance, and fizzle out very quickly because the romance isn't applied properly. Yeah, so they certainly didn't get. That's a whole nother. Wow,
it's all another podcast, but it is relevant to what we're saying.
But it is, yeah. So I think I look again. It's like hitting the child, right? It's got to be applied to modern day culture. I don't think today, when the parents just choose the match for the child,
that would work.
And they meet for 2 seconds. You say that's mazel tov, and let's get married. That obviously doesn't work today, but the age-old principles still work. That it's not about everything about falling in love and the romance thing as it is in the novels or on social media, all that kind of stuff. No, the age-old principles of this compatibility, you've got to really work at relationships, you've got to make it happen. Like it says in the Torah about Yitzchak, that he took Rivka and he brought her to his house or the tent of Sarah, and then he loved her. The intense love came later.
Yeah.
Those principles still hold true. Maybe a little bit different context, in a different way maybe, but they still hold true, and it's a great pity that they're not talked about more and not applied more. I mean, we're answering all these questions very briefly, and of course, each one
could be a podcast in itself, for sure. Maybe we'll elaborate more later.
It'd be lovely if those who are listening, maybe send in a question, challenge us. I mean, maybe we said some controversial things today, maybe.
That's right.
Please feel free to disagree and
Absolutely.
And we can always address it if you send us an email or drop us a line.
Thank you for watching, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Have a wonderful week. See you next week.